Hey everyone, welcome to the next video. So yeah, today we're going to look at foliage and more specifically Foley overlays. So yeah, in the last video that I did, I asked if anyone's got any topics they would like to explore, and yeah, Chris mentioned about foliage. So yeah, let's do that. So yeah, I've actually just recorded this whole video without my screen on OBS, just my cam. So yeah, I've already done this, but yeah, I'm gonna have to do this again. Anyway, yeah, so foliage. There's different games are gonna have different requirements from foliage. So that's, before we even get into this, let's just make that clear that like maybe it depends on many factors, right? Audio budget, project budget, complexity, etc. Like something I've seen a lot on YouTube in the past is kind of a trigger blueprint with a foliage actor in there, and then when you enter the trigger it plays a sound, and that's fine. Maybe a project that's good. I mean, maybe that's suitable for a project. And we're going to look a little more advanced, a more advanced method. So this is obviously a technical sound design channel, and we want to kind of elevate our experience as technical audio designers. So we're going to look at a different approach to that. We'll show off the trigger approach anyway, just so everyone's got kind of like an example to compare against. But yeah, I'll just, let's go full production on this and like make it scalable and really fun. Okay then, so to start, let's go over the example I've seen before. So let's just make a blueprint foliage. And actually this wants to be a trigger sphere. Let's do that. And then let's drag in our like fan, our mesh, and we want this to be 2. And let's drag this into the game, into that level. Let's just do like 3 of these. That's fine. Okay, so they're not showing. I think because they're a trigger base class, they're going to be hidden. Yeah, okay, so here they are then. So so we've dragged them in the level, but we can't interact with them. There's something blocking us. So let's see. The fan. Block or dynamic on the blueprint, so let's just say no collision. Okay, we can actually get in there now. So because they're a trigger base class, this begin overlap is going to work for us. So let's just do post event allocation, and we're going to just post it on the fern itself, just for now. And again, I don't really recommend this in terms of what we're going to cover. And the complexity that we're going to do is more advanced than this. So I'm just going to set it up in a basic way is what I mean. Because this is going to play from the center of the fern, right? But imagine if it was a huge thing and then we just overlap it, it's going to play from wherever the root is, okay? So that, for this example it works. But it may not work for all examples. But we can see as I enter these ferns, we play sound. But as I move around the trigger, we're not really representing the fern anymore. And maybe that's okay. Maybe the game that you're working on, maybe it doesn't need to do that. You might be playing a really fast, like, third-person game where you just care about the overlap. Or then on the end overlap, maybe you do another hit as well, or something. Or something else you could do is, when you overlap, you could then start a looping sound that envelopes as you move around it. That's something you could do, but again, then doing that, maybe you're introducing like cross blueprint communication, and maybe it's not ideal. So yeah, that's a solution that I've seen on YouTube many times before. And again, that's a completely valid way to do something if it suits your game. What we're going to look at though is something a bit different. So we're not going to use any blueprint actors, and that's another thing as well. Like, these are blueprint actors, right? So if there's a different static mesh, then we have to scale that collision to represent that. Who maintains that? Who does that for you? Or do we do that? Does environment team do that? You know, there's just it's not really safe, I think. So we're going to look at something else then. So we're not going to use blueprints. We're going to use just literal static meshes for what we're about to explore next. So the way we're going to do that then is in our function that we made last time, footsteps. Let's, after our post event, we want to do a sphere trace. This could be a sphere, it could be a line, that's up to you. And we want to draw from a start and end point. So my start point is going to come from the owner. If you're following on from the last video, this will make sense. If not, then basically what we're going to do is get a socket location. And we're using the Unreal third person template. So I know that the knee is called calf L, for example. In fact, that'll be calf right because I'm on the right foot. And we want to get the location of our emitter in this case. So this could be your foot socket or whatever. And let's just do radius 10 for now. And we're going to draw our debug for duration. So what that will do is that will allow us to visually see. Now you can see now that the drawing of the debug, it's got the green section that is indicating we've got a hit. Now we're not hitting, we're only concerned about the foliage. So what we want to do in that case is change our sphere trace channel. Now I've already made one, so it's called Foley overlay. But we're going to go over how that looks. So in the project settings, if you go to collision, well, I did make it, but I deleted it, so let's make it again. That's probably some just cache from Unreal, some cache data. So we're going to make a new trace channel, and we're going to call it Foley overlay. Now our default response is going to be ignore, and that's important because all of these channels, these presets for these channels already exist, and we do not want to have our overlays interfering with anything else in the game, probably. So make sure that the default is ignore, so that if we were to edit any of these, Foley overlay is defaulted to ignore. Now we're going to make a new preset for us called Foley overlay again, or let's call it block overlay. That might be better. And we're going to query collision, and let's give it a description. So let's call it Foley overlays allows audio to see the overlay. So what that means for us, and then we're going to ignore everything on this and then just block overlay. Now this is cool because it's going to allow us to only concern about our foliage now. So if our line trace now doesn't have that green section because our trace channel is that overlay. Now we can't actually enter that foliage because we also need to do some more setup as well. So on the static mesh, let's go in here and we're going to change block all to overlay. Now make sure you do this on the static mesh itself. Don't do it on the instance in the level, because if you do it, for example, if we click the fern here and do it down here, that's not good. We don't want to do that, because then we're only doing it for that specific instance. The only time I would do an instance one like that is if we don't want the overlay to happen and you're overriding it to something else. An example might be some water. Imagine there's some water that we care about and the foliage is on top of it. We might want to ignore the foliage and hit the water. Because again, these overlays that we're exploring now, it's not just for the foliage necessarily. It could be anything, like if you're walking in a water puddle, or if we're walking on some glass, you know, this will allow us to see those things in the world and do things with them, which is really cool. So now let's see what this looks like. Okay, cool. So we're getting now a green draw there, that's telling us that we're getting some information back that we want. That's good. So we've done our sphere trace. This works now. That's our kind of detection method sorted out. And again, so yeah, the calf. The reason why we're drawing from the calf. I'm going to explain that now. So what I've seen in the past is, imagine there's a character here and it's kind of, let's say these wonky legs are like this. What I've seen people do is draw from the feet down. That's not always good, because if the surface is there, for example, and our foot emitter's on the toe, let's just say, we may be slightly under the surface then, so our hit isn't going to work. Now, what some people might do to solve that is push the Z, let's say Z plus 100. So instead of drawing like on the floor, they're going to go up by 100 units and then cast down from there. That's also not necessarily great, because what if, for example, in your game you have wall running and you can run up a building, that Z axis is going to break. So another thing I've seen is drawing from the feet, drawing from the knee down to the floor. Again, I don't think that's necessarily a good thing to do either, because let's say, for example, this is a good example. Let's say our plant is here, our little foliage actor. Now we've trampled on this foliage, but our line trace is now from the knee. Again, non-audio people, this is mostly I'm seeing from non-audio programmers or people doing YouTube videos, so not exactly the best thing to do. So what I'd recommend is, whenever we're line tracing, always try and do things, just take a moment to think about, what do we have open, like what do we have access to. Our foot is probably always connected to a knee, so we want to cast from our knee to the foot, and that's going to represent this shape. So our sphere capture is going to look like that, if you can imagine. So it's much more reliable to see where our foot and knee is and represent that as a sphere trace, rather than these other methods that I've just suggested. So that's what I recommend. So that's that then. So what we want to do is, we've determined our trace and we will now want to post an event. So on our foot, let's post event. And we're going to say foliage overlay. And I'm just going to copy that to the left side as well. I wouldn't recommend having duplication like this, but that's another topic. I'd recommend having a more scalable function than what I'm showing here, but this is just for, like I said, this is just a demo. Oh, actually, so yeah, this looks wrong because we're tracing from our right calf still on our left foot. And why is that? That's what is going wrong here. We're not branching, are we? We only want to do that when we get a hit on our trace channel. I was going crazy then. So when we get a hit, return value true, then we do our overlays. Okay, so we're not getting any overlay sounds. Now we're getting our footstep overlay. So this is essentially representing us trampling over this foliage. And in this case, it's on the foot. What you might want to think about is, do you want it on the foot? Is there any other ways that we can do this as well using this same method? An example I'll give is, what if our legs are crossing, and as we cross our legs, then we do our overlay? That would represent us kicking the foliage. That could be another option you could do. Or both. So you could have your foot trampling on it and also kicking it. So again, like, we're just trying to think about the game. We're a technical sound designer. How do we make this game sound really awesome? So these are the questions that we're constantly asking ourselves. So again, let's just compare. We have one overlapped sound, nothing in there. That might suit a game, it might not. Whereas this one might suit a game, it might not. That's what these videos are all about, like exploring ideas, right? So that's that then. So, and this is, again, this is cool because we're getting our surface type and our overlay. So if we're walking on rock and then the foliage is on the rock, we're getting a blend of materials right there, which is awesome. Like, so many games don't do that. They might just play the foliage sound, not the surface underneath it. This comes at a cost. Like, we're doing two voices. We're doing, you know, we've kind of eliminated our trace from before. So again, we've done some savings when we're buying it back again or somewhere else. So, you know, there's just so many factors to consider with things like this, and you know, that's why our job is so awesome, right? As technical sound designers. So I don't know if you've noticed as well, but in this level, there's some kind of water volume here. So let's now look at that. So what if we were walking in the water? We don't want to represent foliage in the water, obviously. So let's up the ante a little bit. Let's try and make this work with a switch in Wise, and then we'll make that work with the water. So I'm gonna go to Wise, and I've got this already set up because I didn't want to remove it. I've already got this working. But essentially I've got a switch here called material, and then two switch values, foliage and puddle. I would recommend a naming convention. I've not done that here, but think about that for yourself. So what this is doing is then when we post an event to this switch, we're using a switch group to determine our foliage or puddle sound. That's basically what that's doing. So instead of posting our sound for always to be overlay foliage, let's change that up. So from here, we want to break from our surface type. Actually, let's go back a sec. What is a surface type? So surface type in physics, there's a list of surface types that we can use here. So for example, we have puddle and foliage. These are just two that I've already made. And we want to create a physical material. So these are going to represent our surface types. So for this one, let's call this foliage. I've already made one called puddle. You know, the property here is puddle. Now this one, foliage, we're going to select foliage there. So when our sphere trace hits our mesh, we're allowed to extract that physical material. That's what this surface type function does for us. Now what we want to do on our emitter is we want to set a switch. Set switch. And our switch group, I'm just going to do it this way. So I'm going to type material and then do this. So what this will do is we're hard setting material as a string. You can actually use these switch values here, but to use these reliably, you'll have to make a function that understands which one to select. You could have some kind of map, so maybe off your surface type, you could get your enum, and you could have a function library that maps that to a switch target and passes that through to you. You know, there's many different ways you can do that. For now, for this video, we're just going to do it this way. So let's copy that, and then actually, before we just play our Foley overlay sound, we're just going to play our overlay switch event there. And yeah, let's copy paste that into our other. No, it's this one. Okay, so left. Foley overlay. Oh. There we go. Oops, I'm just really lost there. There we go. That's what I want. And then our foot right here. Okay, so now let's look at our material. So on our static mesh, we don't want to be setting overrides here on the mesh. We want to do it on the material. So that any place in the game where this material is used, we want to use this physical material. So we're going to select our material there, and we're going to open it up here, and we're going to give it the foliage asset there, like this. There we go. So again, what's going to happen is when we trace against this static mesh, we're going to use that function get surface type, which is going to find the material. It's first going to look for this override, which we're not going to set here. You can do that, but we're going to do it on here. So if that's not set, it's going to then look for this material here, and then when it's going to go into the material and find this physical material for us. So when we're walking on here, now we have foliage. When we step, cool. Now some things to think about as well is, do you want it on every foot? Probably. You can do things like tolerances. So if you've played one at some world location, maybe when you play the next one, you want to look for like the last location was I over some value, just to kind of stop the spamminess a little bit. If you want to do that, that could be cool. Or you could do a chance to play the overlay. Yeah, there's so many different things we can do. So now that we've got that working with the foliage, let's do it with the water. So on the water, again, the only thing that's going to distinguish the difference between the foliage and the water is that physical material. So if we open up the material here, ocean, I've already got it set here for puddle. So and then yeah, the static mesh again has its it's going to see our trace, right? So on our play, we get our foliage, and then we now have our puddles. And again, we're getting that surface below the puddle. Like, how many games have you played where you walk in a puddle and all you get is a splash? You have no concept of what's below that. And again, that's probably fine. But maybe you want to kind of up the ante a little bit. And again, it just comes down to budget, mostly. And then, yeah, like I say, not only do we have splashes, but I mentioned earlier about when the legs cross, do we want other overlays for that? And that way we're really building in a kind of interaction between the character and the environment. So maybe you've got the water splashes and then the water kicking around, using the same kind of idea. And then yeah, maybe those footstep splashes, maybe they duck the surface below, so you still get a little bit of that surface, but the splashes are the main character, right? You kind of, maybe you don't want both of these sounds. Like, you know, if there's a riverbed underneath that water, maybe you want some like stones moving, but then also the splash as well. Maybe the splash ducks those stones. So yeah, like I say, like this is the stuff that I kind of really love as a technical sound designer, is going into vast detail about things like that. So yeah, I think that was an interesting like topic, I think. So again, if anyone's got any ideas that they want us to explore, let me know and we can have a look. So yeah, that's it for that one. See you next time.